President Trump doing his damnedest to get himself impeached. That is a real thing now. Gold has pulled back a little bit, but has been very, very resilient. IPOs are hitting the skids, not looking very good. People are starting to hoard cash. Be very careful out there. The White House is considering investment restrictions. Sounds like capital control to me. All sorts of stuff to talk about, guys. Baltimore water bills, cops gone fucking wild. And I'm going to give you my meatless burger review that I promised. This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. And this is episode 38 of Bizarro World. Nick, how the heck are you?
Not meatless. Going to make some beef stew this weekend and take it on a road trip to Wyoming to go kill some antelope, which will be get me more real meat.
I think that's an excellent place to start. I was going to talk about gold. I'm holding up relatively well and the dollar marching towards 100 as we told everybody it would. We'll see how severe I should say that pullback is, excuse me. Let's talk about your trip to Wyoming. What do you have going on there, Nick?
Oh, I wasn't necessarily planting that seed to talk about Wyoming, but I will make a 13-hour drive from Spokane to just north of Gillette next Tuesday. Drew a tag to pursue a male antelope, the fastest land animal in North America and perhaps the world over some distances. So should be a challenge, should be interesting. Looking to get away for a bit. Unplug will be good. It's been a crazy couple of weeks here on the home and work front. And, I like the outdoors anyway. So if I can go nestle into some mountains for 3 nights, I'll be a happy man.
You have 3 children under 3. And I actually want to get into later on in the podcast just what that's like. You made a comment to me earlier in the week that you now have a much deeper appreciation for what moms typically go through, right? The typical mom that tends to have a couple of kids in the household and has to carry that burden oftentimes where the husband is working and providing on the financial end. But you made a comment earlier this week that you had a much deeper appreciation. I want to dig into that a little bit. Let's talk markets. We'll do my meatless burger review at the end there. Gold's pulled back to $14.97. We've been kind of telling everybody that this would happen. I've said that it wouldn't surprise me to see a pullback all the way to the $13.85 area, to be perfectly honest with you. We'll see if that materializes. Silver, despite all the chest pounding there, has not managed to break that, 2050 level that it really has to break before we get a real breakout on the silver front. It's pulled back as well, closed at 1747 today. And as I mentioned up top, the dollar index is at 99.10, marching towards that triple digit number. Thoughts on that, Nick? I can't help but notice that the junior equities are beginning tax loss selling season a bit early this year.
A pullback, you say a pullback to 1486 or 1495. It's like music to my ears, right? I mean, gold pulling
1385. Sorry. Take that.
No.
Yeah.
I'm saying where it is now, it's pulled back from 1520 or 1530, wherever it was a couple of days ago, to below 1500 now. And man, if you'd have told me that, we'd be talking about a pullback to below 1500 a year ago, I mean, that would have been music to my ears. And so I think we continue to be in a very good spot. And as you and I have discussed before, it would still be healthy to go below 1400, would create energy for the sustained move that I know you've been calling for a while now. And quite frankly, would maybe give people who haven't started to pay attention yet the opportunity to slip into some quality names. I put the folks who read my letter into a name that you've been following and introduced me to yesterday. And if these stocks had taken right off, or if gold had gone straight to 16 or 1700, I think some of these opportunities would be gone. And so I welcome the healthy development, the ebbs and flows of a new bull market for sure.
Excellent. You had cash. You took cash off the table. You had some cash on the side. Have you started deploying that other than in the company that you just recommended to subscribers, which I know you were an existing shareholder of, but have you started to take some of that capital and started nibbling at any of the juniors out there?
I've not. I probably won't take that cash out of the Vanguard tax preferred account where it's at. I'm sort of still watching U.S. equities. They pulled back and they went almost back to record territory, but I still see warning signs out there, Gerardo. I don't want to put that cash back to work. What I'm saying is, when I put that cash back to work, it'll be in some sort of mainstream mutual fund or index fund, or maybe a sector specialized fund, but certainly something in the Vanguard house inside my IRA. And so I haven't put it back to work yet. And you could say I missed out on this recent rally where the broad market regained the losses it had starting in July and August, but I haven't seen any really conviction in new highs. The S&P got back to just around 3,000. The Dow got back to just around 27,000, but on no real strong news or fundamentals, it just sort of meandered back up there. And then when it got there, it looked lost. I'm personifying the broad markets now. They're acting like people. But they did. They got right there, and then they were really scared, right? There was nothing to push them over to new highs. And so
you're making me feel bad for the market, Nick.
I know.
It's lost. It's scared.
Yeah, it really is. It's tepid. It doesn't know where to go. And gold just continues to show strength. The manufacturing indexes are looking a bit weak. We obviously know that economies in other parts of the world aren't doing so great. And you mentioned gold prices and silver prices, but something I mentioned, I think a week or two ago here was like palladium and rhodium, which are still showing strength. And so, I think it's on like Donkey Kong. I told my wife the other day, and she said, "Did you really write that in a letter?" I said, "Well, I didn't put it in those terms, but that's sort of how I feel."
You are not the only person that is being cautious. There were a couple of IPOs, one in particular, that basically pulled its offering the night before in what can be described as nothing short of a fucking clusterfuck of a corporate execution. But I know you want to talk WeWork. I know you want to talk Peloton. I know you want to talk that aspect of the market. It's probably a symptom of exactly what you just described. Do you want to get into that a little bit?
I'd love to. And for the record, I told you the CEO of WeWork was a scumbag probably 6 or 7 or 8 weeks ago on this podcast. And we talked about his self-dealing, how he was, and how the no longer CEO, right? Oh, surprise, surprise. We get things right sometimes. And how he was self-dealing, right? He was leasing companies that he had purchased back to WeWork, right? Sort of like double dipping in typical scumbag CEO fashion. And then flash forward here, and they couldn't get the valuation they needed to go public. And John Lutz, who works for us and publishes this podcast and helps with the Resource Stock Digest website, he sent me a very interesting article by Matt Levin, however you say his name, on Bloomberg the other week, and he was talking about instead of we work, it was like we don't want to. That was the title of the thing. And he was saying he broke down WeWork like a lemonade stand, and he was saying, look, if you got a lemonade stand and you got to put capital into it, but you're not making money selling the lemonade, like why would you raise $8 billion and make a bunch of more lemonade stands that don't make money? And it's like he was like sorry for the lemonade economics, but it makes total sense. It's nothing that we haven't discussed before, Gerardo, whether it's the lack of profitability in Uber, which I know we've talked about, or Pandora, or whatever it is, on and on, right? How these big quote unquote unicorns, these multi-billion-dollar startups that aren't profitable. And the mantra had always been, well, they got to get to scale first. They got to reach critical mass. And some of those has been a success, like Alibaba, for example, where SoftBank was able to parlay, $20 billion into $100 billion. And that's why they plowed headlong into WeWork. But it's a treadmill, Gerardo. I mean, they're not all, they can't all work out. And you're seeing that in Uber now, where they're trying to scale and they're losing money in their food delivering endeavors, which we've talked about here. And then, look, you got Uber and Lyft, who did make it to trade, but their prices collapsed afterward. And now you got Peloton looking awful soft because, surprise, surprise, the fucking exercise bike that your grandmother had in the spare bedroom with an iPad strapped to it isn't a great investment.
Do you know what Peloton means in Spanish?
I don't, but I would love to.
It's slang for ballsy.
Ooh.
Or one with well-endowed balls.
Well, that would probably hurt if you spend too much time on the old cycle machine there, depending on the seat adjustment.
It's a ballsy name.
It's a ballsy business model.
It's a ballsy business model. You got to have a set on you to think that was going to work.
Yeah, and so you're just running into fatigue, right? Whether it's, let me just pull up. I had an article up here I was going to cite. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, we're talking about the return of IPOs here since they IPO'd in 2019. Slack down 1%, Fiverr down 4%. Uber down 24%, Jumia, I don't even know what that is, down 25%, Lyft down 35%. And some of them did okay. Let me not just be selective in my information. Beyond Meat, which I know we're going to get to, has returned over 500% since it went public, but it's certainly the outlier. There's no tech IPOs in 2019 that are up multiple 100%, like Beyond Meat. Over half of them are down. And so, look, it's like a function of what's been going on in the economy. Sorry for just, verbal diarrhea and taking it all over, but you had all this cheap money, right, for the past 10 years. And it was so easy for venture capitalists to give these startups billions of dollars and to keep feeding them. And here we are 10 years later, we have like a tightening of the cycle. The recession is starting to flash around. The rates, which you and I talk about all the time. And like you said, people are starting to be a little bit more cautious of your cash. So it's like, you know what, maybe we don't want to invest another $9 billion in the money losing lemonade stand. You know what I mean? And so that's just stuff that's percolating throughout the entire market. When you read about billionaires going to safe havens or whatever, 1920s Porsches not meeting their reserve bid at Sotheby's auctions or whatever it is. There's all these things that you and I have discussed that we point to as anecdotal, but here we have it materializing in a very real way with a major failed IPO in the ouster of a CEO. So these are sort of like, and I view that as hopeful, right?
Absolutely.
That looks like bad news, like, oh, we work imploded. I'm like, fuck, that's great. Like more shit should go down like that.
Absolutely agree. I had a conversation with the CEO about a month ago, and he said, Gerardo, you don't understand. A lot of these TSX venture companies are going to cease to exist. And I said, good, they should. Yeah. They should. Sometimes letting the business cycle run its course is the appropriate course of action. It should always be the appropriate course of action. But let me ask you this, Nick. What happens when your rich Uncle Sam, which is really just you and I, average Joe taxpayer, decides that it's going to go ahead and subsidize the lemonade stand, right? To take your metaphor, we're now seeing the softball white papers from the think tanks and academics, which is really just Fed speak, a derivative of Fed speak, right? Proposing an expansion of the balance sheet that they just got done reducing. I mean, this is, you talk about, my Halloween costume this year is going to be Two-Face, right? Harry Fraud, Two-Face, the villain. This is just, talking out of both sides. We literally just stopped the expansion of the balance sheet. We just stopped the tightening of it, right? We finally walked it back a little bit. And now they're talking about just making a U-turn and flooding the market with money again. So does that make that lemonade stand business a whole lot more viable?
Jordan, they don't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
A year ago.
Exactly. That's where I was going.
They said that rates were going to be rising right now, and rates are in fact being cut, and they have been cut for the past 2 meetings in a row. And will likely be another one, even though the dot plot doesn't say it, or the Fed members didn't vote like there was going to be another cut coming. There will be another cut, and so no, it doesn't make the lemonade stand more profitable. It might allow it to operate at a loss for a bit longer, but to me, the end conclusion here, the culmination of this, is clear, and it's in much higher gold prices in a flight to safe havens.
Agreed. Not helping is President Trump. A couple of things. I'm going to start with the White House now considering limiting Chinese investment. So the White House is considering limits on U.S. investment into China. They're discussing ways to curb U.S. financial exposure there, including a block of all American investment in the country. The discussions are said to be in early stages, but I have to guess if they are being made public, that is for a reason. That reason, of course, is negotiations and talks with China in this ongoing trade war that has lasted longer than I anticipated it would. It's having a real effect on the global economy. I continue to believe that despite doing everything he possibly can to end his presidency prematurely, President Trump is actually right on China. I think it's far overdue that somebody actually negotiated in a serious fashion with China and then the theft of the IP that's been going on for decades. However, man, talk about 1,000 deaths, right? This is tough. I mean, this would have far-reaching implications. We're talking indexes and the delisting of certain Chinese companies from U.S. stock exchanges, and that can get real nasty really quick. Any thoughts on that front? And then we're going to talk impeachment proceedings, because unlike the Mueller report that, was all hype, really, there wasn't a lot there. This one seems to have some legs because it's basically what he said and what he did. But let's talk about. Yeah.
No, I was going to say I don't have specific thoughts on that because I haven't read about it and I haven't seen too much about what you're describing. What I will say, though, is that, for the past, call it 12 to 24 months, those of us in the, I don't know what you want to call it, the safe haven camp or the resource camp or the libertarian camp, or whatever, have sort of seen the writing on the wall. And you've done a great job at articulating how it was going to go from Japan to Europe to the United States. And, we always have these good talks and we talk about rates and economies and what we see happening. And we always say, but no one's got a crystal ball, but no one knows what that catalyst is going to be or what it's going to be that takes it. I'm just generalizing now, takes it over the top. Sort of like the conversation that's had in the uranium market, right? It's a matter of when, not if. We just don't know what the catalyst is. So what I'd say about the China thing that you just described is catalysts are starting to pop up with much more frequency.
Yes, sir.
And one of them is going to be the one. And so I still don't know what the catalyst is or what it's going to come. But what I do know is that the half-life between potential catalysts that would induce a flight to gold or a flight to safety or however you want to frame that, are becoming shorter and shorter, whether that's the time between, it took to get to an inverted yield curve or now the failed WeWork IPO or now the stuff with China you're talking about. And here's the impeachment thing. It's like boom, 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 boom. They're just getting sooner and sooner and sooner. And one of them is going to be the one, right? It's like the final snowflake that causes the avalanche, right?
Agreed. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. We haven't talked about it yet. On the formal impeachment inquiry. We should be very clear that this is an inquiry as to whether or not to proceed with impeachment, which is very different. But this one feels different to me because President Trump doubled down on it publicly. This isn't something the Democrats made up. This isn't something they think was said. This isn't something that was whispered. This is something the president said he did, doubled down on it proudly, frankly. And we're now learning a whole lot more that doesn't look good. We're learning that the potential whistleblower was somebody from his own camp. We're learning that the potential witnesses that were there are from his own team. Again, this isn't something that was initiated from the left as far as that aspect of it goes. We know about all the deep state stuff, and some of that's conspiracy theory stuff. Some of that's very real, right? I think there is a concerted effort to get President Trump out of there. He's not making it any harder for them than it has to be, and I think this might actually do it. With that being said, he had his biggest fundraising day on the back of the inquiry. He had a $13 million fundraising day from the base being galvanized by what in any other time in our history would be considered treason. The ironic thing to me is the comment that he says he made to his staffers in regards to whoever the whistleblower is. He says, you know what they used to do to spies back then, right? When they committed treason, obviously implying that they would be executed. So again, not doing himself any favors. Thoughts on this one, Nick? Is this going to blow over like the Mueller thing, or do you think this has got some more teeth?
This has a bit of teeth. I watched it fester. So it started in early September with some news reportings. I think the Washington Post and a couple of other outlets, and you got to love Twitter, right? Because you can cast such a wide net, and you can follow people who are involved in reporting on these stories directly, and sort of watch them evolve in real time. And so I want to say it was like the first or early in the second week of September, I started seeing some journalists tweet this and saying, "Follow this story, folks. This one's got heat. This one's got some legs." And so I did. There was a woman named, her last name is Brandon. I forget her first name, but I'll post a link to her Twitter feed underneath this podcast, and you'll see the threads that she's posted on this for the past, call it 2 or 3 weeks. And so it does feel different. Now, I'm as jaded as the rest of the American public when it comes to hearing about Trump in the headlines and the partisan politics. And I feel like for the entire first 2 years of his presidency, he was being impeached every week with really no follow through and a utter lack of teeth. And it just was something that was time consuming and distracting. But if you look at this objectively, as I try to do with political things, it doesn't look great. He had pulled some vitally needed military aid from one of our allies, Ukraine, prior to asking them to investigate one of his most serious political rivals headed into a general election next year. Like you said, he admitted it. The White House released a transcript. You just know that the left has been gunning for him, obviously, since he was elected. It's been their number one political goal. And if I'll digress for just a second, if you look at some of like the poll of polls, like some of the stuff that Nate Silver at 538 does about, what are some of the top Democratic themes? Is it the economy stupid? Is it whatever? Cops being violent, or, whatever the top issues are. Do you know what the top issue is for Democrats, Gerardo? I found this fascinating when I read it last week, because it's not even an issue. It's not even an issue like that the common man is worried about.
What's their top
the number
issue?
one? It's getting rid of Trump. It's not like making the roads better or cleaning up the water or climate change or raising the minimum wage or abortion. The number one Democratic issue, if you poll them, is simply beating Trump. They don't care who it is. They don't care if it's a Raggedy Ann doll on a mock post. It literally doesn't matter who it is or what their platform is, as long as they beat Trump. And I know I just digressed for a bit, but all that to say, that is their number one goal. And so I think they're going to pursue this. You got a formal inquiry started, as you said, the whistleblower. I wanted to post a picture of me blowing a whistle this week, by the way. I thought that would be funny. I still might do it. I have a big old whistle.
I think the title for this podcast should be "Who Blows the Best Whistle?"
I'm the best whistleblower. But no, to answer your question, it doesn't look good. What he did was clearly wrong. You can't use the presidential office and taxpayer money and try to coerce our allies for your political gains. It's clearly not right. Lots of things this president has done are not right. And the only thing I can say is we shall see, because despite the whistleblowing coming from his own camp, we know that like the Lindsey Grahams and the Turtle O'Connells of the world, they are firmly supportive of this president. And so we'll see where it goes. But to answer your question directly, this has a bit more heat than the past 2 years of impeachment would-bes.
Agreed. I think we can all agree volatility is going to be a permanent theme here for the next, definitely the next several years. And if we're right about this fourth turning, I think, 2020 is going to start with a bang, and we're probably going to end it with one as well. You mentioned, yeah, go ahead.
Can I go for one more second?
Absolutely.
So, when I watch this whole thing unfold, I just want to bang my head against the desk, because some of the ways in which it has to unfold to me are just so archaic and so stupid, for lack of a better word. Like, did you read even the whistleblower complaint, like how formally it had to be worded? And according to section 272-9 of the code F of this and that, like, I don't understand why it has to be that complex. And then it's like, well, I don't know. The gentleman from Kentucky says we can't release the transcript because this security official says this. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, do the citizens own the government or not? Like, are we allowed to know what the president is discussing on the phone or not? And that's some of the stuff that just boils my libertarian blood, because people just eat that up like, oh, it's classified. it must be in the best interest. Fuck you. You work for me.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest swindles in American history is the wool that has been placed in front of people's eyes, the average American citizen who believes that it has to vote a person, that it has to vote according to party lines. 30 years from now, we're going to look back and it's going to be absolute insanity that we had to go to the poll and pick one way or pick the other, or write people in. It's just so antiquated. Everything about our system is so antiquated. And that gets me to my next thing that, makes my blood boil. You talked about taxpayer dollars being misallocated. Our money, citizen money, right? The reason police departments exist is because you and I pay property taxes and all sorts of other taxes to make sure that we have healthy police departments. And what are these fucking people doing this week? Well, in Orlando, a police officer was fired for arresting 2 6-year-old students because the 6-year-olds were throwing, quote unquote, air quotes, tantrums. This guy arrested 2 6-year-old students. They were cuffed. They were taken down to a juvenile detention center. You're about to put your kid into school here, Nick. How would you feel no matter how bad a tantrum your kid threw? Your 6-year-old. We're not talking about a 16-year-old kid that weighed 200 pounds, that was throwing punches or throwing, fire extinguishers at other kids. These were 2 6-year-old rowdy little kids were arrested. That's in Orlando.
Well,
yeah,
I would be in cuffs, first of all.
Correct.
Second of all, it's actually a tough issue. Now, you don't put 5 and 6-year-olds in handcuffs, but I'll tell you, it happens more often than is reported in the news, and certainly much more often than this one example in Orlando. And I'll tell you how I know. It's because my father is involved in the planning of bus routes in the county in which he resides and the training of bus drivers. And I won't say frequently, but I've talked to him, and on more than one occasion, they have had to restrain an elementary school student on a bus. Now, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling you what's happening out there. And the reasons he says why is, well, the bus driver can't touch him because the parent is going to claim abuse. And how else do you deal with a child who is about to break windows? And I don't know what happened in Orlando. I haven't seen that story. I'm just telling you other stories that I've been relayed from people that work at public schools. If you can't get the parent there, and sort of playing devil's advocate a bit, I guess. If you can't get the parent there and the bus driver isn't allowed to touch them, what do you do with the 6-year-old who's about to throw himself out of the window of a moving school bus?
No, and I have zero problems with the restraint part of it, right? The problem I have is you better damn sure not take my 6-year-old, cuff him or her, and then drive them unaccompanied by a guardian without another adult present to a police station or juvenile detention center or wherever the fuck you want to take them. You're not taking my kid off of school grounds unsupervised. And I just hope that you're one of the good cops, because more and more there's either less good cops out there or they're very quiet when the bad shit happens, which brings me to my next story.
It's the latter.
It is the latter. It absolutely is the latter. And you know how we know that? Because we're here. And again, I don't mean to paint with a broad brush, but it's just too much, guys. It's too much. I'm sitting here in Austin, Texas, just outside of it. And just outside of Dallas, there's a trial going on of an officer who's being charged with murder, Amber Geiger. She went to her apartment complex after getting off her shift, walked to the wrong floor, walked to the wrong apartment. There was an African-American gentleman sitting in his couch watching TV like many people do in the evening. And this lady opened the door, saw somebody sitting down on the couch, yelled, "Put your hands up." According to testimony, the gentleman yelled, "What are you doing? Get out of my house." And she killed him. Mm-hmm. The lead investigator, testifying in front of a judge, says that she, the officer who killed this gentleman, he doesn't believe she did anything wrong. He doesn't believe she committed a crime because she felt that the gentleman in his house, on his couch, in his apartment, presented a deadly threat. Come on, guys. Come on, America. We're paying these assholes to get up in court and lie to us to exonerate their fellow officers. I am all for good cops. We need good cops. We need to quit this shit where cops just don't tell the truth because they want to protect their own. It's not good for society. It's not good for the communities that these cops are in. And it sure and hell pisses me off that I'm giving tax dollars so these assholes can go up in front of judges and juries and outright lie about what is going on. Which brings me to something. Yeah, go ahead.
You and me both, Gerardo. No, I don't have to add anything to that. I think the things I've written and the things I've said publicly and put on social media, I mean, you know where I fall in this issue. The bad cops have got to go, and they're not going to go until the good cops stand up and say something, right? Because what's the famous quote? All it takes for evil to prevail in this world is for good men to do nothing. And the good cops, they do nothing to throw the bad apples out of the cart. And until that happens, the good cops are bad cops. And no one wants to fucking hear that because of the thin blue line and how much they, sacrifice to serve our country and lie to us.
Yes, and if human life isn't enough, people, for you all to get upset and demand some accountability from your local police departments, there's also a financial toll that this takes. We had a headline today: Stormy Daniels, one of my favorite Twitter accounts, just settled her lawsuit against the city of Columbus, Ohio. Do you know how much money she got?
I'm about to find out.
Do you remember what happened in Columbus, Ohio?
Oh, God, did it have to do with a strip club?
Yeah, so I'll provide some context, right? She was performing at a strip club in a relatively conservative part of Ohio. A lot of Ohio is relatively conservative, but it was a strip club. She went to the strip club. She did what strippers do. She stripped. There were gentlemen there that were having a great time. A couple of those gentlemen were undercover cops that happened to find out that she was there stripping that night. They reached into her bosom, put their faces in her tits. She shook them, and then they proceeded to arrest her for inappropriately touching the clients. Okay. So clearly politically motivated cops with a certain view of the world that didn't care for Stormy Daniels' persona. So that now is going to cost the city of Columbus, Ohio, a nice $450,000 because you had two idiot cops with their own personal beliefs that couldn't separate personal from professional and decided to make an example or try to out of somebody in her own work environment for doing nothing wrong. $450,000. And that's the settlement. I don't know what it's going to take for America to realize that we need to change so many of our systems that are in place. They are so outdated. And I mean, we could do this every week. If I look for stories, I could find them every week, right? Stuff like this. Yeah. And it's just, it's out of control. It's absolutely out of control. That's it. That's all I got on that. That one gets me going every time, but I'll leave it there. What do you got, Nick?
Got next?
I know you wanted to talk about Carson King.
Well, it's sort of a continuation of that, right? Because you got these cops who, I mean, it's all connected, right? I mean, we're all connected. You got this guy Carson King. You want to let cops go operate with impunity just because they got a badge on? They can do whatever they want: rape, pillage, kill, steal. You didn't even touch on like police interdiction, where they just steal your shit after they pull you over and you can't get it back. That's a whole another issue.
Or set you up if you don't have shit.
Sure. Baltimore Gun Task Force. I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
So then you get people that actually do good. Like this gentleman, Carson King. I don't know if you had a chance to follow this story, but it kicked off an important discussion about cancel culture this week in the United States. So you had this kid, Carson King. He's at a University of Iowa football game, whatever. He's holding up a sign that says, I'm out of Bush Light. I need some more Bush Light. Could you Venmo me some money? And he puts his Venmo handle on the sign. Well, he ends up getting on ESPN's College Game Day, and the money comes a rolling in, much more than he needs to buy a case of Bush Light, like $100,000, and then $200,000, and then three, and then Bush Light says, oh, then he says, hey, this is more money than I need to buy beer. I'm going to donate it to the University of Iowa Children's Hospital. Wonderful thing to do, right?
Amazing thing. Absolutely.
Earlier this week. Bush Light says, wonderful thing to do. We'll match you, sir. And Venmo also says, great thing to do. We will match you. $1 million ends up getting raised for this children's hospital. Fantastic thing. And
a little context, this gentleman is 24 years old now, right? That's important.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, young kid. So this obviously makes national news. People are tweeting about it, whatever. It's getting viral. Excuse me. This reporter at the Des Moines Register decides to do a story about Carson King, digs up a couple of tweets from 8 years ago when he was 16, which could have been jokes, could have been construed as racist jokes, whatever. I'm fine with racial-based jokes. I'll make one later if you want, and then someone can try to cancel me in 10 years when they listen. And so he found these. He said he wrote an article in the Des Moines Register, the profile of Carson and what I just told you about him raising money, and then said, "Oh, by the way, Carson has he tweeted these things about black people when he was 16." And then, oh my gosh, we have to cancel Carson. His raising $1 million for the children's hospital is it just can't be a good deed in today's culture. We have to ostracize this person for making tweets 8 years ago. Bush Light has to publicly come out and disown associating with him. But then there was a backlash to the backlash, which I absolutely reveled in, and I've been waiting for this to happen because now I'm just going to rant for a little bit. You mentioned Sticks and Stones, or you recommended I watch Sticks and Stones by Dave Chappelle a couple of weeks ago, and then I did. And he starts off that comedy special by saying, he points at the audience and he says, y'all are fucked up. He's like, I don't want to perform for you. I forget the exact wording he used, but he was saying, I'll make a joke. And he was like, and then y'all are going to go back and dig up something I did 12 or 15 years ago and try to cancel me. He's like, fuck you. You guys are the problem. I don't even want to perform for you. And that's like the entire country, right? You can't even raise $1 million for a children's hospital without someone going deep into your social media history and trying to cancel you outright. And we've just seen this perpetuated over and over. Outrage about this. Outrage about this. You know, I've been outraged about fake outrage for like 2 or 3 years now.
I've been there with you.
Finally, this fucking reporter got fired because there was such a backlash to him. And not only did he get fired, but he himself had racist tweets, the hypocrite motherfucker.
Yeah, fuck that guy. And I want to say this, you know, the kid, this Carson King kid, he was 16 when he made the post. He says he was quoting a show. He was actually quoting Tosh.0, right? Which is a show that's well known for, you know, pushing the boundaries, pushing the lines. Do we encourage racist language? Do we encourage? No. Do you have the right to be racist? Everybody has the right to have their own opinions and be racist. Sure you do. Keep it to yourself, or you might get hit, you might get shot, you might get beat up. You know, things happen when you voice your opinions, but you have the right to believe what you want to believe. Why can't we do both? Say, hey, this kid did a great thing, raising $1 million for a great cause, and he made some shitty tweets when he was 16. Tweets that he apologized about here 8 years later, that he explained. And again, whether you believe him or not, you have every right to believe him or not. But why can't we as a society take one thing, put it here, and take the other thing and put it there, and get on with it? I don't get it.
It was just a couple of weeks ago we canceled the new, I don't even know the SNL guy's name because I don't care about SNL, but they fired some new comedian that was supposed to join the show because he had made some like Asian jokes back in the day. Like, I don't get it, man. Like,
yeah, I didn't like that guy though, so fuck him. And that's really the way this whole thing works, right? That's really the way this whole thing works. It's if somebody is likable enough, you know, public enough, wealthy enough, oftentimes, if you can hire the right team, to clean your stuff up and spin it you can almost get away with anything in this country, in the famous words of President Trump, right? Who said that he could shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Nothing would happen. He seems hell-bent on testing that theory. We're going to see how that works out for him. But that really is what cancel culture is nowadays. Do I have to buy Chick-fil-A's awesome chicken sandwiches if their corporate beliefs don't align with mine? No, but I shouldn't trash somebody who does, right? Do people have to subscribe to our podcast or our newsletters if they don't believe that we should be opining on social and cultural issues in our country because we care? No, they don't have to subscribe. You can vote with your dollar, people. But it also is not going to prevent me from writing it or saying it, right? So I think we have to get to a place in this country where we just have civil discourse and we can agree to disagree in a way that isn't just toxic to everything and does nothing to advance a real discussion, right?
Right. You want to have a discussion about an interesting topic? You mean talk about the Baltimore water bills?
That's why you're here, Mr. Hodge, to be insightful, intelligent, and informative, and every now and then tell us a nice story about something.
Well, I'll try. I don't know how many of those things this is, but I had read a couple of weeks ago. We've been reading more and more about universal basic income and student loan debt forgiveness and Medicare for all, and everybody gets something for free, right? Andrew Yang is going to buy your vote, and Bernie is going to give you all free education and free healthcare, and on and on. And so the other week I found it interesting when I saw that the Cornell Medical School was, and you've seen, let me backtrack for a second, you've seen some at like commencement speeches, for example, where some rich former alum will forgive or pay for all of that class's debt. I'm sure you've seen that.
Absolutely.
In the past year.
That was fantastic. The entire class. Happened. And then he challenged all the other alumni to do something as good the next year. That was awesome.
That's right. And then so other colleges are starting to experiment with things, right? I saw one med school that was, if you can get in, you could go for free. I forget which one that was. But now this is where I'm starting to get more interested in this and where the nuance comes in. So Cornell Medical School now has said that you can go for free, but only if you qualify for financial aid. If you don't qualify for financial aid, you have to pay. How do you feel about that?
If you don't qualify, you have to pay. I believe if the alumni...
If you do qualify, you get the whole thing for free. Not just the financial aid. You get to just go to Cornell Med School for free.
I would have to dig into two things. One, what the qualification guidelines are. Two, if the money that is going to be used for, let's say, me going there for free is coming from private alumni donors. If that's the case, I don't have a problem with it if it's private alumni that are donating that money specifically for that. Because then if I was the donor and I mandated that my funds go towards kids that have the grades, have the talent, have everything but the income, I'm okay with that if it's private money. Now, if it's school funds from the school budget, that's a different matter. Then that's where I think we have to have a different conversation and really get into, what the guidelines are, the dichotomy of if the kid really can't afford it and the only thing missing is the money, then how much do we lose in talent as a society by not finding a way to subsidize that talent in hope that, in the future, society benefits from the next doctor, the next tech whiz, or whatever that may be. And that, I don't think there's a right answer to that. But if it's private money,
tough one.
It is. But if it's private money coming from private donors, from alumni that are saying, like the gentleman at Cornell that said, hey, look, it's my money. I'm paying for the whole class this year. All of your college debt is eliminated. He didn't say who qualifies, who doesn't. He just said, it's my money. I got it. I'm paying for the whole class. Hey, alumni next year, the next speaker that has the speech next year, top of that one. I thought that was great. I thought that was fantastic. We talked T. Boone Pickens a couple of weeks ago, and I read a piece that he wrote that was meant to be read after he passed away. And one of the things that he encouraged us to do as a society was not depend on government to fix it all. Having more initiative as private citizens. So yeah, private money, private donors. This is what I want the private money to go to. All for it. if it's coming from the school budget and it's going to affect the quality of education and everything else, then we got to have another discussion about how fair that is to the students that are paying to go to the college, that are struggling.
That was my next question.
Yeah, that are working 2 jobs. You know, my brother was a recipient of I don't know how many scholarships because he was brilliant and got all sorts of help. But, you know, he also worked 2 jobs and worked throughout college and busted his ass and got through and is now giving back and making, you know, meaningful contributions and hopefully he passes that on. So it just really depends. You know, it really does depend on what the intent of that original money, where that money came from and what the intent was. What was it meant to do?
I gotcha. I can't help but wonder if I was paying for my student to go to that school alongside a student who wasn't paying, how I would feel about that or how I could justify it, or if I would just encourage my kid to go to another school. Or, you know, what ultimately wealthy families are going to do is like they're going to like get their kid adopted into somebody else's name so they can get qualified to have financial aid. Some of that stuff goes down already, but you're just going to create a framework where wealthy people come up with new ways to make themselves look poor. Now, here's the next kicker. So Baltimore City has sent a plan to the legislature, which means they're voting on it, that poor people can pay less water bills for using the same amount of water as people who can afford to pay. Does that make sense? So you use the same amount of water, but if you're poor, you pay less. Is that fair?
No. Fuck that shit.
No. Right. Right. Yeah. Fuck that shit. It's right. And so
get a roommate, get 2 roommates, get 3 roommates, do what immigrant families have been doing from whatever country they come from. Grouping up. Uncles, aunts, let's all pitch in for the water bill. Let's do this. Let's buy a duplex between all 10 of us and figure it out. Hey, that's the spirit. That's the entrepreneurial spirit that's made this country great. If you can't afford the water, get a couple of buddies, room up, find a way to afford the water, right?
Yep. Well, that's not what Baltimore's doing. Baltimore moved one step closer this week to implementing a water billing system that will charge poorer residents less than more wealthy residents. Through the use of credits, the legislation establishes a tiered billing system tied to income. For the city's poorest residents, it would cap their water bill at no more than 1% of their annual pay. Nobody capped my water bill when I was poor, Gerardo.
Yeah, see, that's
nobody
bullshit.
capped.
Yeah, that's
nobody
bullshit.
capped my tuition at a private university when I was poor, Gerardo. I made it.
Agreed. And the other side of that is this is again why bringing it back to the business cycle. The business cycle should be allowed to run its course. The complete opposite side of that is corporate welfare, right? And all the bullshit that we subsidize, oil companies, coal companies, all sorts of companies that we as taxpayers knowingly or unknowingly subsidize. You can't make a fucking profit, get the fuck out of the business. It's that simple. I don't want to subsidize oil companies. I don't want to subsidize banks. I don't want to do it the same way that I don't want to subsidize somebody's water bill. Education's a gray area for me because again, if it's private money, and that's what I want my private money to go to, then that's where I want my dollars headed, right? Different conversation there on that front of it if it's private. But when it comes to this, yeah, both sides of it, whether it's corporates or just somebody that just is having a hard time in life right now, no, there shouldn't be subsidies. That's a very slippery slope that doesn't lead to good outcomes for anybody.
It's getting tough out there. Wealth disparity in the United States is the widest it has ever been since it started being tracked in the 1960s.
Widest, not widest, right?
That's right.
An important distinction. I wanted to make sure we didn't get canceled for the wrong thing. If we're going to get canceled, we got to make it count, damn it.
It's the widest it's ever been. And so it's really, really tough. And I think about a couple of things. Gosh, what do I think about? I think about the fact that, you know, my wife tells me, you know, sometimes we invite people over to our house and they never come back. And I think about that and I wonder why.
Because they're assholes. No, I'm kidding. I joke.
Yeah.
I was there once. I haven't been back. I've been busy, but I can't wait to go. We got to meet little Nick.
You know what I'm saying.
I do. I was being funny.
And then I think about like, well, let's take it back to impeachment and how we spent the first, 2 years of this president's term in the Congress trying to get him out as the number one Democratic, principle or concern, as opposed to like, really working towards increasing the federal minimum wage that has been set below $8 for the past decade, which, make no mistake, is corporate welfare, as you just defined. And so I would much rather see an increase in minimum wage than a unfair, seemingly arbitrary scheme on who pays less for what.
Agreed. I'm with you 100%. I wish I had like a counterpoint, or I could play devil's advocate with you, but no, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, the water bill thing is a bit crazy.
The water bill, yeah, and what's next, right?
Well, that's it. Slippery slope. We talked about slippery slopes last week and how I'm a slippery slope guy. That's what I was talking about with the puberty blockers, right? What's next?
Polypropylene.
Oh, this is a good story. You want to talk about polypropylene?
You want to talk about it.
Yes, I do. So polypropylene is the hard plastic. Polypropylene is like the deodorant container, right? Like your Old Spice High Endurance or your Gillette. That's like the polypropylene, as opposed to the polyethylene, which you drink your water and your soda out of, which is much easily recyclable. The stuff that you drink out of, as opposed to your consumer goods plastics, are much easily recycled. And so the hard ones, the polypropylenes, the deodorant containers, they're really hard to recycle. And so only 3% of them actually end up getting recycled, even though we throw them all in the recycle bin, because a couple of reasons. One, when you recycle them, they turn to like gray and black as opposed to clear. So it's tough for like Johnson & Johnson to reuse them because they don't want to put deodorant in a black container that like doesn't scream clean and fresh, right? It's got to be like clear to put deodorant in, or Dawn soap or whatever. But another reason is because it's hard to reform those plastics. They have like different rigidity, material characteristics after they're recycled. And so only 3% of all the polypropylene gets recycled. We've done a much better job with the polyethylene, the soda and water bottles. I am here with good news. Gerardo.
Please share. We need some good news. Country's going to hell in a handbasket.
Procter & Gamble has figured out how to recycle the polypropylene so it has the right material properties. It's in the right size, little tiny plastic beads that we need to turn into Dawn dish soap bottles and back into clear, high endurance deodorant containers. And he's figured out how to make it clear. So this is a Procter & Gamble scientist that's figured this out. They've just set up the first such call it a factory or a industrial site to do this in Ohio, I believe. And one of the biggest breakthroughs in recycling in a long time that should allow us to turn those polypropylene hard plastics back into products that can then be recycled again, as opposed to finding themselves in a landfill. And I don't know, I think that's just a feel-good story about human achievement and solving problems. And it's like real and it works, right? It's not like let's blow some air into a cave and hope to like in 20 years that'll be an energy storage.
It's not solar roads.
That's right. It's plastics that we can actually reuse right now in a process that works. And so I'm all for it. I thought that was a feel-good story.
I love it. I like ending on a good note. So I think we should end there, but let me give you my very quick Beyond Meat burger review. I figured out why the company is so successful.
Go on.
Because after you eat it, you're still hungry. So you have to come back and get more. No, all jokes aside, listen, I said last week, I did my goal for the week was to get outside of the house, to go buy one of these burgers, to have an open mind, and to give it a go. Here's my take. You can clearly tell the difference. There isn't, oh my God, if you close my eyes, I wouldn't know the difference between this and my great Hop Dottie's burger. Not the case. You can tell the difference. It is relatively good. I am a carnivore, so tough judge, right? But it's good. It would do. It's not a bad burger. The texture of it is definitely different. You feel lighter, which of course makes sense because it's plant-based. It's a plant-based patty after you eat it. But I definitely walked away feeling like I still want a burger. So I think that's why the business model works. I think it makes, certain people feel good, and I think other people that don't eat meat, I think it's a great option for them. Me, myself, I'm definitely sticking to my llano poblanos at Habdadi's, which is very meat-based, very delicious, and yeah, that's my take. So it wasn't bad, though. It was better than I thought it was going to be. That's all I got.
I know we want to wrap this up, but I was reading some things this week saying that it's good on the water consumption front because it takes so much water to raise beef. And so if you're looking to not eat meat for it to save resources, that's good.
It's great.
But on the emissions, not so good because it relies heavily on industrialized mechanized farming to grow the crops that are necessary for the inputs, GMOs, etc. And so, everything in life is a trade-off, including your feel-good meatless burger.
Agreed. It's kind of like my metal straws that I run around at the club with. You debunked the whole plastic straw thing for us, I think 4 months ago, Nick. Is that accurate?
Yep.
All right. Another feel-good story, and this is breaking right as we leave. Everybody, a federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from imposing new rules that would allow, guarantee, the lengthy detention of migrant children. So what a federal judge had the brains to do was saying, if they're here illegally and that is the only crime they committed and they are children, then deport them. You're not going to keep them and pimp them indefinitely. Get them out of the country. If that's the law they broke, you're not just going to keep them and traumatize these kids forever. So I'm glad that judge had some sense. I am Gerardo Del Real. Mr. Nick Hodge, thank you again for your insights. This is episode 38 of Bizarro World. Have a great week, everybody. Nick, have a great week chasing. What were you chasing again?
Antelope.
Bring back some antelope. I look forward to it the next time I visit.
Beyond antelope.
Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Love each other. Be nice. Say something nice to each other. Don't be creepy about it. See you next week.
See ya.